Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, The Courageous Walk. I am Jonelle Reynolds, and today I have with me Dr. Maureen Siebert Gaitors, who is a nurse scientist. So welcome, Maureen. I'm so happy to have you here today. Most of her research has been in dealing with infertility in Black women. So, Maureen, I'll take the floor, introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the topic.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you. First, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to have this conversation today. I'm a geek about my research, so I love talking about it. So I'm really excited for today. So yeah, I'm Maureen. I recently finished my PhD at Duke University School of Nursing, and I do study factors that influence decision-making to initiate or seek or complete treatment for infertility, specifically among Black women. And so a lot of people always ask, like, why that population? Why that? First, it actually started out as a really personal story that I often share with everyone that'll listen. I am a nurse. I became a nurse in 2012 when I worked in the emergency department in Connecticut and then also in New York. And so one day I woke up, I had crazy right-sided pain. And of course, being an ER nurse, I was like, okay, I'm having an appendicitis, whatever. And then I go in, and after all these scans, they found that I had a huge tumor mass on my right ovary. And so they weren't sure if I could keep my ovary. And at that time, it was about 2014. So I was 24 years old and just kind of freaking out, like, oh, wait, what does this mean for my fertility? Some people were like, yeah, you can still conceive, but if I'm thinking about losing an ovary, that doesn't sound like it's going to be an easy process. Right. And so went into surgery, and I was able to keep my ovary, but even though it was torn, so it twisted on itself twice, there was still good blood flow, and I was able to keep my ovary, but I do have like a C-section size incision on my stomach right now. And because of that incision, you need a break. I couldn't go back to work for about 6 weeks or so. So in that time, I was just like sitting there. I was like, what if I did lose my ovary? What happened and stuff? And so just honestly researching, I felt really called and led to just study infertility in Black women. There was nothing in the literature. Like, I literally went to the library at the hospital that I was working at, and I found maybe 1 or 2 articles just talking about the experiences, but there was hundreds and thousands probably of articles of other groups of people. Right. And so from there, I was really inspired to go into graduate education. So that's when I went to Winston-Salem State, got my master's, and while I was there, I was able to get paired up with researchers at Duke. And so my mentor, Eleanor Stevenson, who I love and always shout out every time I can, just taught me about the basics of infertility. And so from there, I've been able to form a project that got me through my dissertation phase about Black women and factors that influence them to seek treatment, and then ultimately to initiate treatment. There's so much that I've learned, and I've been super happy to share that with anybody. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. And it's interesting, right? Because oftentimes we end up studying the things that we're most passionate about and that touch us deeply. So, it's unless, I guess, you're studying like ants or something, I don't know, that might be a different story. But the human condition, I think, is always connected to some experience we've had. So I think we could sort of talk more about, since I'm right now, my interest is really in infertility and fertility. So, walk us through what is it that we need to know about seeking treatments and the barriers and all of that?
Yeah, so when I first got into the research and started talking to women, so my project, what we called a mixed method study. So I was in the charts. I went through almost 400 charts. And one thing I noticed while in the charts, that women were just waiting so long to come and seek care. And so I'm not sure if your previous guests have said, but infertility, you are considered having fertility issues after 12 months. And so I was just noticing people are coming in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And so when I was looking at the charts, I was just having these questions are, why are people waiting so long?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to interview 13 women, and they gave me some great information on why they were waiting so long. And so there's a myriad of issues. The first was stigma. There's a lot of women who are just living in shame and pain with their partners and just wondering, why me? I think that really got me curious and interested in why Black women specifically feel like they're failures once they can't conceive.
Mm-hmm.
And so that led me into the literature and reading more and talking to more women. And a lot of it is because of this stereotype that, well, Black women don't have problems having babies. If anything, we have too many problems, too many babies,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I was able to do a lot of good reading and realize that, one, Black women actually have twice the rate of infertility than white women.
Is that wow? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's been documented from the Center of Disease Control. Pretty much they have this every few years. They talk about National Survey for Family and Growth or Fertility and Growth. And it has been consistent since about maybe the 80s or 90s that Black women have had higher rates of infertility. And I can go into a little bit why. Because untreated STIs can cause infertility. Fibroids can be a factor in it, and who tends to experience those more? Black women. So the numbers kind of make sense. And so a lot of the conversations that I had with women was finally they had to step out of their shame and step out of their stigma. And a lot of that was finally opening up to others. And then they finally, find someone who's like, oh, wait, I was experiencing that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I often tell people as well, especially in the Black community, I was like, think about that auntie and uncle who's married for years and never had their own kids. They would spoil everybody else and they kind of just, take anybody in, but everybody can point to like, oh yeah, there is that person. And so the stigma will definitely kind of get in the way of people from seeking treatment. There's also the money issue. Many people think that it's so expensive, or it's going to be the most invasive treatment that I have to jump to first. It's not perfect in the U.S. healthcare system, but there are 16 states that offer insurance mandates that your insurance company has to cover some sort of infertility coverage. And so Massachusetts actually has the best. Connecticut has some provisions. Maryland and New Jersey, they all have kind of like different provisions. And a lot of that is just by looking up your state laws or even on your insurance benefits. I had private insurance from my school in North Carolina. And North Carolina is not a state that has mandates, but when I look through the benefits, they actually did cover some screening and testing and some of the procedures as well. So just kind of moving past those financial barriers and those ideas that I can't afford it. A lot of it is more so just getting in to be seen, and from there you can figure it out. Sometimes it doesn't require the IVF. If you have a fibroid that's maybe blocking somewhere, removing that fibroid may be the help that you need. But one thing for sure is that the timing is really important. As we get older, our eggs kind of get older as well with us. And they mature, at different rates, and everybody's eggs matures at different rates as well. So waiting several years to kind of address the problem can sometimes be an issue as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
one, I didn't know about, Black women dealing with infertility twice the rate of white women. And I also wasn't aware about, untreated STDs or STIs playing a role. I was more familiar with fibroids, right? Because that is a very common ailment that Black women face.
Yeah. So it's funny. Yeah. Another issue is also like education, right? We do have an issue in the U.S. system, education system, with comprehensive sexual education, and kind of gets kind of murky in different like states and ethics. But overall, I think our education, especially as Black women, has been don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant, from our parents to the school system, just don't get pregnant. But there is a point where we need to ask a question like, what would I do if I couldn't get pregnant? In terms of the STIs, so chlamydia and gonorrhea, if left untreated, can lead to pelvic inflammatory disease. And from that, pretty much the lining of your uterus pretty much becomes inflamed. I'm kind of using like regular terms so most people can kind of comprehend. So if a sperm and an egg is trying to attach to the uterus, but it's inflamed, then that can cause some issues as well. So that's why going to the doctor regularly to get screened for STIs is really important, because a lot of them don't have any symptoms. You can never know, oh, I think this is a symptom of X, Y, and Z, when usually it's like silently brewing as well. So yeah, and that's really important.
It's not reachable from the inside, like for yourself. It's not like you could just go and look.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you need some help.
Yeah, I need some invasive help.
Yes. So yeah, that's another important thing. I know some women will say, well, there's nothing wrong with me, so what's the point of going to the doctor? Preventative care is super important, because there can just be a regular screening, even if you think I haven't even done anything and all this other stuff. It's just, there's so much more peace of mind from just getting checked and having your regular pap smears, or just getting a regular screening. So it's really important.
So how they've moved, if you've had consecutive like clear pap smears, that you should wait a while. Do you think that women in their late 30s and older should be skipping pap smears? Let's say they're not out of that.
No, I don't think it's, I think you definitely should be talking with your provider about what makes sense. And also, it's not just, your own cells as well. It's your family history. If you have a family history of cervical cancer, that's something to look into as well, in terms of maybe discussing when the frequency. But there are clinical guidelines. Usually if you're cleared, today, usually you could wait another 3 years. But that has a lot to do with like communication about health with families, which can sometimes be tough, especially for the immigrant population. I come from Haiti. You don't always get the real story of how people passed away because a lot of it is nobody really knows, right? They didn't necessarily have that sort of advanced healthcare system as well to kind of tell us those things. And then there's also stigma in other disease processes as well. I have a friend that is looking at, whether families talk about their health histories or not, and that can sometimes be challenging in the Black community. So a lot of it is, being in communication with your family, and then also being in communication with your provider as well, to kind of discuss like what would make sense.
Yeah. I know when we were prepping for this, you had also mentioned the importance of a partner. So
yeah,
a partner important?
Yeah, so my work, first, I mainly worked with partnered or married heterosexual women, because there's different reasons why other groups might actually seek treatment or not. So for this project, I just dealt with women who were married to men. And so a lot of it was their partner on board? Did their partner have their own stigma as well? So that's something to talk about. I actually did a really great training with some pastors and religious leaders, which I had so much fun doing. And one thing I said is to consider, even in your premarital counseling, ask what would happen if you guys couldn't have a child. And then also too, one thing I educated them is about male factor infertility. That's something that we often don't talk about as well. Often people think it's the woman, she can't carry the child and all this other stuff. In my sample of almost 400 Black women only, granted I didn't necessarily know if they all had Black partners, 44% of the men in that sample actually contributed some sort of male factor infertility. So it's like low sperm count or no sperm at all, and they had issues. And so that's really important too, going over the stigma that men feel. And also getting encouragement from your partner to actually seek treatment. There's some women who would only discuss with their partner that they were having issues and their mothers or mother-in-laws didn't know. And so it's really important for the partners to also be educated as well, and have those conversations of support, what ways that the males can support their partners. But on the flip side, there's also the discussion of single mothers by choice. There are women who go and willingly seek fertility services to conceive. And so that's a decision that they have to make on their own. But, you know, it's hard out here in the dating game, for sure, for a lot of people. And those are decisions that people need to make. And in some ways, you know, I never try to influence anybody to do anything, but you just have to kind of put into consideration time. You know, we talked about egg quality, you know, decreasing over time. And, you know, is this something you really want to do with a partner? And that it's fine. And if it's something that you feel like you can do on your own with the support of your family and your friends as well, that's fine as well too. But I think people need to make those decisions and have those considerations as well.
So last time when I was talking with Dr. Jackie, and we spent a lot of time, you know, sort of discussing preconception preparation, right? What should women be doing, you know, in their late 20s, in their 30s, even before the, you know, pregnancy is even on their radar. But you know, talking about like the man and his role, really made me think that it should be both people going and getting checked, right? And doing the preparation, not just the woman.
Yes. Yeah, I would totally agree. You know, and it's much easier for men to get tested than women. You know, they can do a sperm analysis. There's certain clinics or insurances that will cover that, but typically it's, you know, I don't want to put a number out there. It's very different state to state or clinic to clinic, but I think for less than $100 or so, you know, don't quote me, but you can analyze your sperm. You know, there are plenty of men also who have waited, not necessarily waited, but, you know, maybe they're having unprotected sex for so many amount of years. And think about it, you've never gotten anybody pregnant in that time, you know, just the odds that you never got anybody pregnant. So these are just sometimes certain questions that I'll have people consider, and to encourage them to also get checked out as well. You know, Black men and prostates, and all that can affect, you know, quality of sperm and all that. And so diets, certain men in toxic professions, right? If they're working at a power plant or, you know, around a lot of harsh chemicals and stuff. So it is very important for the quality of the health of the man to also be optimal as well. You know, it takes two. I think for centuries and generations, it's always been a female problem. And I think men really should take responsibility for their role as well in the process.
So it sounds like, you know, in the, whether people are married or cohabitating or whatever it is that they're doing, when you get to the point where there's a potential for there to be a pregnancy, or when you're being intentional about it as opposed to oops, you know, both parties should probably go and, you know, get a checkup and make sure that not just the woman first, but together, right? Going and doing it so that it's not really about blame or who is at fault, but, you know, we're in this together.